everyone, and thank you all for joining us here in East Baltimore. Thank you all for being here today. We are joined today by City Council Vice President Sharon Green Middleton. This is the first time I've said this out loud, my councilman, Ryan Dorsey. Please don't tell Councilwoman McCray. She'll be very angry. Councilman Zeke Cohen, who has joined us today. Councilman Tony Glover, Director of Transportation, Corinne Johnson, business leader and transportation advocate, John Laria, East Baltimore resident and Assistant Director of Planning, Dr. Nicole Stewart, Alan Reyes, President of the Eagle Park Neighborhood Association, Cheryl Washington, President and CEO of East Baltimore Development Corporation, Nick Henninger from GBC, and many others. We are gathered here today at the corner of Chester and Ashland Avenue to condemn the cuts to highway user revenue that had been proposed and passed yesterday. These cuts threaten the resurfacing of Ashland Avenue and 190 lane miles across Baltimore City, including Bel Air Road, 33rd Street, Cold Spring Lane, Northern Parkway, Hilton Street, Pulaski Highway, Oliver Street, Patterson Park Avenue, Washington Boulevard, Broadway Street, Druid Park Lake Drive, Lafayette, and Patapsco Avenue. And we are calling on the House of Delegates to reject these cuts and fully restore critical funding for our roads and bridges right here in Baltimore City. Let me be very clear that we understand that our state leaders inherited the challenges facing transportation funding from previous administrations. But again today, we are calling for our state leaders to come together with all of us here at the local level to do the tough work of figuring out these issues long term. There is no more asphalt to be kicked down the road. There is a long track record of the state balancing its budget on the back of Baltimore's infrastructure, and we will not stand for it any longer. Not only are we the economic engine of the state, with roads and bridges used by our residents and visitors from across the state, Baltimore is the only jurisdiction in the state responsible for the maintenance of all of our roads, bridges, and an interstate in I-83. Outside of the city of Baltimore, state highway and non-toll road interstates are maintained by the State Highway Administration. But here, we have to do it ourselves. Baltimore City's increased infrastructure responsibility is why Baltimore has historically received the largest direct share of the local highway user revenue dollars. However, since the Great Recession, cuts to highway user revenue, HUR, have meant that Baltimore has lost out on $900 million of highway user revenue funding and approximately $3.6 billion in potential federal matching funds to repair our aging infrastructure and create jobs. As a result of these cuts, the city has been forced to take out loans in the form of Maryland Department of Transportation revenue bonds that we must pay back the state plus interest. This year alone, we're projected to pay over $14 million in debt service on these bonds, meaning that the state is literally making money off the cuts to highway user revenue. Enough is enough. We cannot continue to compromise the safety of our roads and bridges or simply repaving roads that have not been repaved in far too long by cutting Baltimore's transportation funding. We must end the decades of disinvestment in our city, and that starts with the House of Delegates rejecting the cuts that were approved yesterday. If you can see the road behind us, no one will disagree that Baltimore's roads are in disrepair. But this has to be the complete and total conversation about those funding cuts. Happens every time, Emily. The funding cuts that were approved, in addition to the historical cuts that we have not seen put back in since the Great Recession, that have resulted in all of those funds lost and resulted in all of those lane miles lost of resurfacing, all of those bridges lost that could have been fixed across the city of Baltimore. And with that, I will now turn it over to Council Vice President Middleton.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you, Mayor Brandon Scott, and thank you for your very important words I'm Sharon Green Middleton, Vice President of the City Council and representative of the 6th District, and also serve on the executive board of the Maryland Association of Counties and the National Association of Counties. And Baltimore, as the mayor has said, Baltimore City is a major metropolitan area. It's a major municipality. We are the connector between Washington, D.C., between New York City, New Jersey. Our roads are, so many people travel on our roads throughout the day. We're a major metropolitan area where our surrounding counties come into the city to work and leave out back to the counties. We need improvements on just about everything that deals with transportation in our city. And this is so important. We must support what our mayor has been saying. Our streets are in disarray. We picked this intersection because it's an example of our need. So please, look at all of these things carefully. Our city is an example of really what's going on around the country. So we plead with you to reconsider what is going on. This is a connector with everything and all the improvements and advancements that we need in our city. Thank you, Mayor, for giving me some time to make some comments.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. We've also been joined by Councilwoman Odette Ramos from the 14th District. And now I will bring up to the podium Director Johnson from Baltimore City Department of Transportation. Madam Director.
Thank you, Mayor. Under Mayor Brandon Scott's administration, the Baltimore City Department of Transportation has made tremendous strides over the last few years advancing projects that reinvigorate our transportation infrastructure systems. We are making important investments that address historically disadvantaged, disinvested neighborhoods in Baltimore City, and we are rising to the task to identify and correcting existing infrastructure and systems that do not benefit all. We need our roads and our infrastructure to benefit everyone. But to create this inclusive and equitable economy here in Baltimore, the largest and the economic generator for Maryland with the port, we need investment. We need to put people, put their infrastructure, put their quality of life first. If you had to walk a mile in our shoes, or 170, because that's the estimated amount of mileage that would not get resurfaced with these cuts. If you had to do that, you would see firsthand the impact of these cuts. If you were right here with us today, you would see firsthand the condition of this roadway, the sidewalks, and the infrastructure in this area, and it needs this funding. To quote a local council member, one person's inconvenience is another's lifeline. In January of this year, Mayor Scott and I testified in Annapolis about how disproportionate HUR cuts would impact Baltimore City. Baltimore, we are able to do more with less, but unfortunately, that cannot be a precedent that we will continue working with and that we respect. Baltimore City is attracting record investments, and they are making an impact. However, the lack of funding halts major projects, and it stops us in our tracks of being able to leverage the federal infrastructure dollars and the other opportunities where we need a local match to deliver on those projects. The stop and go of our projects and the simple condition of their infrastructure, the roads that they travel on every single day, not seeing those potholes addressed, it erodes the public's trust. At the Department of Transportation, it is our job to maintain the assets we have and advocate for better connectivity and service Baltimoreans. And this requires that we fund and design landscapes that touch every single person, whether you are a motorist, a biker, a scooter enthusiast, trail rider, bus rider, or pedestrian. We need a Baltimore where residents, tourists, and entrepreneurs can see their transportation needs reflected in their lived environment. And without a commitment to fully funding the HUR through fiscal 28, we gut projects that symbolize and represent the hope that we had when this initial bill got passed and we expected the increased HUR. This will halt our progress for Baltimore overall. And for this reason, we urge the House of Delegates to stand up for Baltimore and see our hard-earned progress through and support us in our efforts for building up Baltimore. Thank you, and I'll now turn it over to John Laria.
Good morning. I'm John Laria. I'm a lawyer here in Baltimore at Ballard Spahr. I'm also co-chair of the Greater Baltimore Committee's Transportation Committee. I was invited by the mayor to share some business and institutional perspective on these potential HUR cuts. HUR cuts affect all counties, but none more so than Baltimore City, as you've heard. The city has a unique obligation to maintain all of its roads, including state highways in the city, and the proposed cuts are borne disproportionately by the city. 2/3 of the cut goes to Baltimore City. 2/3 of the proposed HUR cut goes straight to Baltimore City. These roads and bridges are part of the city's essential infrastructure. Employees use them to get to work, and by the way, not just city residents. Visitors to businesses and attractions use them too. The poor condition of these critical roads and bridges leads to an immense cost in vehicle damage, in driver safety, in pedestrian safety, in cyclist safety. But the damage goes far deeper than that kind of material or bodily harm. It damages our reputation, and it damages people's perception of the city, and unnecessarily so. So ultimately, these cuts, if they succeed, affect the city's economic climate. They affect its attractiveness to business. They will be barriers to retention and to relocation. Everybody's aware that Maryland is facing a major funding crisis in transportation. And that's a problem that has to be solved by everybody who has a stake in it. But for God's sake, let's not make it worse. And these HUR cuts, if they go through, will make it worse right now, and we need to be making it better. So I joined the mayor, I joined the council vice president, and everybody here to call on the House of Delegates to take a different stance, and for the legislature overall to come out of the session with these HUR cuts restored so that we can get back to the business of repairing and maintaining this critical infrastructure in Baltimore. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And I think he says something that I just want to reiterate. 63% of the cut statewide will be felt here in the city of Baltimore. That is not something that we can stand for. We all went to Annapolis a few years ago alongside my colleagues from in counties across the state of Maryland, talking about how devastating the cuts that were put in for the recession and us not getting that money have been to all of us. In fact, we heard from Councilwoman Ramos, reminded me of this the other day, one of our colleagues from the Eastern Shore who said that they were having to use chip and tar to resurface their roads because of the cuts. We know we have to have these cuts restored and to have the long-term solution, and we have to do that tough work now. And with that, we'll take questions.
We're going to start by going straight down the line. Start with Emily.
Emily? It's only one Emily today. Just you, Emily. The future years, yes. The future year funding is what we're talking about, and we need that put back in now. We can't wait. We can't do that on a year-to-year basis, so to speak. Myself, I know other folks around the state have been sharing the same response, but we are impacted more than anyone, and we want those funds put back in now. We're very appreciative for the 25, but we have to do the long-term and outlying years as well. Oh, Director, have we calculated how much it's going to be? It's about $35 million per year. That's a lot of roads. Nothing?
What if the funds are not restored? What happens then?
Well, what I said, those projects, this street doesn't get resurfaced, right? More projects like the ones that I mentioned, like Bel Air Road and Pulaski Highway, they don't get resurfaced. That's what happens if these cuts stand and we don't get that funding restored, because we have to understand that's how road resurfacing and highway resurfacing works in the state of Maryland. And as I laid out before, we're particular, right? So if you're talking about Bel Air Road, for example, at the Bel Air, at the city-county line at Northern Parkway, when you get above, the county doesn't have to do that. The state does it for them. But once you cross into the city line, the same exact road, that is the same exact highway, has to be done by the local government, and it won't be done if these cuts stay in place. And we also lose out on federal dollars, right? Because we need the matching the funds. They need money from all of us to pull down on that historic infrastructure funding that is out there, which is why, one of the reasons why we're saying that we have to deal with this issue now, because the stars are aligned. Finally, we had a president who actually did something on infrastructure, not just talked about it. We can't lose out on that once in a lifetime opportunity.
What do you think is the solution to get funding to Baltimore?
Well, I think that's what that has to be done, right? It's not these funds. We have to figure out long-term highway funding across the state of Maryland. This is not just about Baltimore. We're talking about Baltimore because it impacts us all. And I've been very clear. I know the business community has been very clear before. Myself and my county executive colleagues have been very clear that we're willing to aid and help and partner with our state leaders in any way that we can to help figure out this issue. But I think we start with rejecting the cuts. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.